Hey
Wow, we're
everyone,
live.
welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I have with me legendary comic creator Steve Stern, along with legendary artist Lamar Supreme. So welcome to the show because I'm super excited.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there's a lot going on
that.
here. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different components. Obviously, you have Zen Intergalactic Ninja with
hmm
Lamar's first, I guess, 3 books he did the interiors on, not his first work on the project. But I kind of want to catch everybody up on what is Zen and how the two of you met, because there's a lot of stuff going on with this.
Yeah. Um, I guess it was like 1991, right, Steve? 1992,
Around there, maybe a little later. Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, by the way, like kind of like a historical time in culture because you had so much going on as far as comics, hip hop, just everything in general. The early 90s was such a massive like cultural explosion of creativity. You had jungle, trip hop, house music. There was all this electronica. Everything was kind of like exploding on the scene at that time. And comics was actually becoming like mainstream because of the fact of the value and what they were becoming worth. And the collectors were kind of going crazy for it. So it was an amazing time. And also, I was a much younger man. And
Weren't we all?
but I feel like Steve, you kind of you're like eternally the same, young, right? Youthful, I would say. You were like the older guy back then. You still
Thank
seem
you. I
like a young
appreciate you
guy.
saying
Like,
that, sir.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I was airbrushing in a
I'm very
mall called Green
sophomoric.
Acres Mall. Yeah,
Yeah. And I'm
but
I'm walking down the hallway and I see this guy doing this airbrushing, and the art blows me away. Go ahead, sir.
and then I'm like, wait, you're the creator of Zen Intergalactic Ninja Comics, which I knew about back then. Because Steve was kind of like this local neighborhood guy that had a mural of Zen Intergalactic Ninja on a wall, on this massive wall, like that's in the site of Long Island Railroad train like path, which I would take and I'd be
Yeah.
like, what is that? It looks airbrushed, it's an alien,
Yeah.
it's massive.
Yeah.
You don't see that in the 90s. You might see that now, but you didn't see that back then. So I was trying to contact Steve actually for a couple of years being like, "Hey, I'm an artist. I want to, work
Yeah.
on your comic." And, I never was able to contact him. There was no internet back then. There was no social media. And here I am airbrushing in Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream, Long Island. And Steve walks up to the booth and he's like, "Can you airbrush this comic book character for me?" And it's literally Zen. And I'm like, "Funny you ask. I've been looking for you for a couple of years." And he says, "Well, like, can you do this?" And I said, "Oh, I can do this, and I could also illustrate comics." But I didn't know I could. I never illustrated a comic in my life.
Yeah.
I just knew that I wanted to do it. I looked up to all the greats at the time: Rob Liefeld,
Right. And
Joe
boy, did you
Quesada,
illustrate to
Frank
a
Miller.
fare thee well, sir. God.
Well, I mean, at the time, it was like a fanboy in a way. So, yeah, I didn't know the impact till later on.
So let's even jump a
Yeah.
little bit
And
because
yeah. Sure.
So obviously you get spotted in the mall airbrushing, and then
Mhm.
how did you go from airbrushing to getting on the comic book and doing a cover? Because I think that you never did a comic cover before. You were airbrushing, doing some other stuff, and this is the book. This is the book. It's a nice image of it that everybody wants, and
Right.
so how did that happen? Because I think this was your first work in comics, and it obviously blew up that issue. And it's like the most desirable issue out of the entire Zen verse, I guess, for lack of a better word, and kind of put you on the map a little bit in the comic world.
Yeah.
It did, and Steve was a big proponent of putting me on the map and pushing me, promoting me. But I had no experience. I just had a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of like inspiration. So
And
it was all
talent.
that.
And
Thank you.
talent.
Thank you. So it was just a matter of just like, bringing my best foot forward to the comic book world and seeing where it went, you know. And I had no idea, fast forward all these years later, because there was a period where I kind of gave up doing comics. I mean, I literally gave up doing comics after doing Zen. I was just like, this is brutal. This is such
That's right.
grueling work. It's like, let me get a regular job.
It is. It is.
It was hard. It was hard. Yeah, I was
Yeah, well,
just like, I just,
comic art is super labor and time intensive. And I'm just so pleased that I was able to get Lemore to work on the Rawhead Saga 71 page sequential story with me. And when the folks see these 71 pages of his work that was done decades ago, they're going to be blown away. Blown away.
I mean, I'm still looking, I look at the originals and I'm like, oh my God, I did that. It's like, I couldn't do that now. That's a young man's
So
game.
No,
I
really?
want to table that. For one second, we're going to get into the Rawhead arc and everything that happened with that and how even that came about. But what was this like for you,
Mhm.
Steve, finding talent? Because, obviously in
Mm-hmm.
today's age, there's all these new artists coming up and a bunch of people that I know find talent and then they try to almost homebrew talent as well. And what was that like? Because there is a skill and there is an eye
Yeah.
for it. And as an interviewer, there are people that I've spotted way before everybody else. And it's very rewarding. I feel when somebody, and I'll use Tegan Knox, who's a very good wrestler, who's Nixon Noel. And, Tegan Knox had to be Nixon Noel before. And it's very rewarding when you're like, I know this person's going to be a superstar. And then 2-3 years later, they are that superstar. So what is that like for you? Because it's kind of cool when you catch talent before they're big.
Yeah. Well, what I can say is this: almost everything really important in my life that has happened has been a result of serendipity. The way I met Dan Cody, uh, pitching his parents' ice cream business, Cody's Old Fashioned Ice Cream, and then Dan and I getting together and working on Zen, totally
Oh my God, I
serendipitous.
forgot. You were an advertising guy. You had your own
Yeah, and
advertising
to an extent,
business.
yeah, exactly
Oh
right.
my
I had
God.
an ad agency, and talk about serendipity. Walking in the mall, and there's Lemore airbrushing t-shirts. I mean, and these are just two out of many things I could tell you. Uh, but I do have an eye for art. I mean, I saw what Dan could do with an airbrush. I saw what Lemore could do with an airbrush, and then without an airbrush. And there's always a little luck involved in life too. Serendipity, luck, timing. These are the cosmic forces that dominate our lives. And so today I'm just thrilled that we're able to reissue the Rawhead Saga in Lemore Supreme Zen. I mean, it's like this is over 25 years coming back around now. So it just blows me away, honestly.
It totally does. I mean, for me, it's kind of like a time travel in a way,
Yeah,
because I tell everyone when I was doing Zen Intergalactic Ninja comics that Wu-Tang was the musical inspiration.
yeah,
Even Dev Love X, KMD, who was eventually became MF Doom that I
right.
worked with. These were like the artists that I was listening to while I was drawing Zen. Fast forward
And
years later, I end up co-creating Czarface, who's part, and Inspector Deck is part of Czarface from Wu-Tang. And then we do a collaborative album with MF Doom. So it's weird how all these things kind of like culminate in full circles in a cycle.
Yeah,
So really interesting.
it's true. It's true.
But in a way,
Sure
it's kind of
is.
like, MF Doom would talk about that, where he created an album called Victor Vaughn. And he talks about him being a time traveler, of like embodying his younger self, where he was emboldened and he was just like brass and like, could do things and say things that wasn't really part of his like actual branding, but because he could travel in time. He was a dimensional traveler. So he can create
Wow.
worlds within his world. And in a way, as an artist, like that's what he's inspired me to do, or like he's let me be a part of in a way. So shout out to MF Doom, wherever you
Yeah.
are, rest in peace.
So talking about worlds, and then we got to talk about this because obviously you did 3 issues on Zen, the Rawheads arc, and how did that even come about? Because obviously you do the cover, and then how did that come about? Because this is what I think everybody wants to know is that going from doing a cover to doing interiors is a whole different beast. It's a whole different ball game, and usually, from what I know now, a lot of people start in interiors and then do covers. And so what was that like being part of this and everything that sort of happened? Because I think this is like some of your only comic art that you've done.
Yeah, I mean, back then I thought doing a cover was cool, but like doing the interior would be cooler. Little did I know, fast forward, that I just wanted to do covers. I mean, I
Yeah.
would still do an
Yeah.
interior. I
Well,
just don't
it's
think I could pencil everything, like, or ink everything. I would definitely be a
Mhm.
co-creator and a co-writer in setting a shot or angle or a style or even an aesthetic, but doing all the laborious
Mhm.
work, again, that's a young man's game. So for me,
So
it's just
true.
kind of like interesting. But yeah, it was more, I think,
It's
of Steve putting me on a platform because I was so enthusiastic and he saw the talent and he just like gave me the ball and said, whatever you want to do, just do it. Like, and I'll work the dialogue in later or like, but he set up the scene and he gave me free reign to be as creative as I want. So that's something that
sort
I
of like
definitely
the
appreciate about. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
yeah. It's sort of like doing it the Marvel style. I was watching the Stan Lee documentary last night on Disney Plus, and there was quite a bit of discussion in there about how Stan interfaced with Kirby and Ditko, and just when you've got an artist of Joel's Lamore's caliber, you don't want to restrict him. You don't want to restrain him. In fact, you want to let him do whatever he feels he needs to do. And I'll damn well match the words, the dialogue, and the captions to what he drew. And what he drew is sensational.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
See,
Yeah, I do appreciate that.
this is so interesting because when you have somebody who can go the distance and you have somebody at that level, I mean, that's something that, as a writer, you're forced to step up. And it's very interesting because I don't think every artist can go the distance. And when you get somebody and you don't necessarily know, but then you start seeing it, what was that like when you started seeing the art that was being produced and what it was looking like and even the caliber? Because that's something that I would imagine like, holy shit, this is something that's at a different level that hasn't been done in Zen yet. And this is sort of a defining moment, I think, I would imagine, for this comic. And obviously,
It,
it's 25 years later. So clearly it did something.
Yeah, well, truthfully, because of the raw power and intensity of Moore's art, I felt I had to write uh, the ultimate Zen. Went well beyond anything we had done previously. You know, Zen has had a couple of different incarnations, the whole environmental theme, which tied in with the two Konami video games and the Just Toys toys. But when it came to working with Lemore, I wanted to write a story unlike any one I had done previously. And that's why in this story, we tackle, among other subjects, international terrorism. It's basically about a terrorist who becomes nuclear powered, as it were. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that story came out in 1995. It predated 9/11 by 6 years. So I'm glad we did that. And there's a lot of other subtopics that are woven into this story, and it's a story that even moves into the cyberpunk realm, where we move into the future, and Lemore and I create this iconic cyberpunk female character, Shy Girl, and so kingdom of aliens who are not good aliens, like Zen's an alien hero, who are working to subvert the human race. So there's a lot going on in this book.
And then fast forward 25 years later, we find out that there might possibly be a real intergalactic federation out there and a war that's been going on in outer space. I don't know how much you want to believe, but I tend to, you know, kind of keep an open mind, you know, and just, you know, listen to the facts and, you know, all the information. And it's just weird how this was kind of like maybe it was a subconscious or a, you know, a collective thing that was happening in our minds, which is why we were creating what we were creating. But yeah, it's so bizarre to me.
Yeah, no, what I was going to dive into and really go into is that it's good writing and it's good artwork. And that's the thing that I think, and I'm going to say something that might be slightly controversial, but I think comics today are lacking good storytelling. They're lacking good writing. They're lacking, you know, art that really redefines something and pushes the limits. And I'm not saying all, but I think a lot of it is. And I think that's why this has stood the time of 25 years. Because I go back and I look at comics from the 70s, 80s. I'm a big Teen Titans fan. George Perez.
Oh, yeah, me too. George Perez was the dude, man.
Oh, yeah.
It was George Perez, the Deathstroke. Oh, I mean, when Robin becomes Nightwing, Starfire, like I never thought that group would actually have like a resurgence or a renaissance, but and in the different ways too that they come out over the years, it's kind of like mind blowing, you know.
And so the way I view this is that it's really good storytelling, and it's all of those things. And I think that's why it stood the test of time. And what is that like? Because there is an art to that. And there's stuff from look, the 90s and early 2000s and the 80s. That is rough. I mean, without a doubt. But there's also a lot of good stories. And then you fast forward. I mean, it's hard for me to find good stories. Obviously, off the air, we were speaking about one of my favorite books, which I think is one of the best books that's been written in the last 10 years, and that's Saga. I think Saga's been written really well, but it's hard for me to find good products that are written well that will be here for the next 20, 30, 40 years and still be spoken about. And so I'm very curious how you guys feel about that, because I think you hit the nail on the head with this.
Thank you. Thank you. To be honest, at the time, I wasn't sure where it was going.
You know, there's a lot of...
I had no idea. You know, like there was no internet. You know, you had no wall to bounce this off of. You were literally in a vacuum. You go to Comic-Con, and most people didn't even know who you were. You had to educate everyone that came to the booth of what you were doing and who you were over and over. It wasn't like a line because they knew who you were, because they followed you on the internet. Like
maybe that was a good
nothing.
Thing. Yeah, that's a good thing that you have to educate, you put yourself out there. And now today you go and you shoot out a tweet, and kind of I feel it takes away.
Yeah, it takes away the personal aspect of it for sure, because I feel like there's a strong connection between a fan and a creator. when you can educate your readers and your audience into you, and they get a vibe of who you are, and they see the artwork, and you can explain all these like intimate backstory details of the art and the story, which is nice, which is great.
Yeah.
But I mean, like compared to now, it doesn't, it doesn't exist almost unless you go and meet these creators in person, which is why Comic-Con is still important.
Right. And I, to this
You
day,
know?
yeah, and I'll be there at the first comics booth. I think it's booth number 2001. I've been doing it every year since Zen became a title of First Comics. And I love doing conventions. I do about a half dozen of them a year. It's all the strength I have is to do about a half dozen of them. And Comic-Con, where upwards of like now 200,000 people go, it's an extremely intense experience.
I can't even get into San Diego Comic-Con anymore. I used to be able to get passes. Now it's just like, how do I even get in?
Well, I'll get you in there if you want to go.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, there's a couple of things too that I'm releasing at San Diego this year too. I just did a card with Yesterday's, and it's for the Misfits. So it's a Misfits card, graphic, T-shirt, and I did one last year too. So it's becoming this yearly Misfits Yesterday's L'Amour thing, drop at San Diego. So yeah, it's crazy.
But you're not going to be there yourself.
You're not. Well, you know what it is? It's like,
yeah,
I'm at the point where it's really hard to get to these conventions if you're like paying on your own dime because you're always working. If somebody wants to pay for my way and put me up in a hotel and get me passes, I'd be more than willing to go. But it's expensive. It's an expensive
You're touching
venture
on something that's so interesting. So
yeah.
I know Tom Hutchinson very well, and Tom's been on my show, and Tom's been very nice to me from Big Dog Inc. And what he tries to explain to con runners is that if you want me to come, and it's not necessarily a local con, it's not an hour drive, you got to help me out, whether that's a hotel or help me with my table or anything.
Totally.
Obviously, he's in the States, so he's not going to go to England per se when he's in Michigan,
right.
But he'll drive to Indiana. But if it's a 6-hour drive, maybe they comp him his table, maybe they comp him a hotel room, maybe they help him out on something. And sometimes con runners get in, sometimes they don't. And I think it's a real issue when, not for every creator, because obviously people have to grind, but certain creators, and I think certain cons might get it, and I think certain cons don't get it. I think it's a real problem in this industry, and I think there's a lack of education around it.
Totally. I mean, I did cons probably like 15 years ago, and not for comics. I did Comic-Con San Diego in particular for when I restarted my art career 17 maybe years ago, restart my art career, and it wasn't comics that I wanted to do. It was making toys, designer vinyl toys. And that's literally what sparked the whole art career over again.
And those,
because for a while I wasn't doing art. For 17 years I was doing architectural design.
The collectible items.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy that it was toys, but then, here I am doing comics again. Well, not comics, but just, my art is definitely heavily influenced.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. It's very
also
interesting.
What were you saying, Andrew?
Oh no, what was Steve saying? Steve's I was going
to say that L'Amour has done some amazing murals, street art, if you want to call it that. And in fact, most recently, he did a redo of a mural in Cincinnati, right? That was inadvertently painted over, and all of the local media there, the TV stations, they all picked up on it. And there's some amazing news reports you can see, if you Google around, of Lamore repainting this mural in Cincinnati.
Also, the
Just happened a
video
week
that
ago.
was taken of it was amazing. Like my friend Chris Breeden, who owns Arnold, the place, the establishment, which is almost like 200 years old, where the actual mural was actually painted on. He made this incredible video with drone footage, like innovative stuff that he was actually doing for the video was kind of mind blowing. But he was also, relegating like all these other projects in Cincinnati, like a toy drop. We did a Skyline ape, which is one of my designs. We did a print of the mural on letterpress hollow foil. And I was like, this is kind of like the chromium covers back in the day. Like this is the influence, this is the inspiration of it. And portrait of Emilio Estevez, which is kind of mind blowing. But yeah, there's all these things that I got to do in Cincinnati, which is quite fun. And if you look at the mural, it's literally heavily comic book influence.
So what is that
Yeah,
like
and
for you? Because obviously you're doing all this stuff. You're getting to sort of do some stuff like the chromium and foils and hollow foil stuff. And then obviously, Zen somewhat had a part in starting this, but then you've done stuff in hip hop. And now a lot of this stuff is coming full circle. And it's like everything is almost like a link in the chain for you. And everything is just built up into a certain direction. And what is that like? Because your whole career is now sort of lined up really interestingly.
It's like the great singularity. That theory, like everything is converging.
Yeah.
Everything's converging into a
Yeah.
black hole. Everything is culminating together. Like
yeah.
I was expanding my art in different realms and in different mediums, in different scenes. But somehow it's weirdly all culminating into one now. How weird. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just kind of like I wanted to expand as much as possible and put myself
If I could
in so many
mention,
different avenues.
we never, Zen did. Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
So now we have, although we never did a Lamore Supreme chromium cover, we now have something even perhaps way more audacious incorporated into the Kickstarter. It's these 11 by 17 metallic art prints that there are, I think, 5 of them available. One of them is of that issue 6A cover, right? Then there are the 3 Rawhead covers, but the one that's also selling like crazy, being ordered like crazy, is the Shy Girl metallic art print. And it's just so, again, it's like everything's coming full circle, but now we're going scaling up to a 11 by 17 metal print that's suitable for framing and is going to be adorning a lot of people's walls. Yes, Lamore.
So let's actually talk about this too, because obviously a lot of this stuff is really hard to find. That 6A cover is nearly impossible to find. And if you find it at a con in a box, buy it and just run away. Just run away. Don't tell anybody. Just offer the guy like $10 and be like, you're asking him for it. Here's $10 and just shut up and leave. Just shut up and leave. But all jokes aside, it's really hard to find. I think some of this other stuff from Rawheads is pretty hard to find, but not as hard to find. And now it's all collected after 25 years. I don't know if it's necessarily remastered, but it's nicely formatted. It's put into a nice bound book, whether that's soft cover or hardcover, and it's obviously probably an easier read format. And so what is that like too? Because there's people who are new coming into this who know nothing about Zen. And then there's the old time people who've been reading this for 36 plus years or 25 years. and now they can get it again and relive it. So what is that like? Because it's extremely accessible, I guess is the point I'm making. And what is that like for both of you? Because it's kind of, I think it's important to make things as accessible as possible, because what is old is new and people want to read the old stuff.
Yeah, I think it's great because I mean, I get a lot of like artists that are like grown men that are like, I was 11 years old and I got this cover, or I got this issue that you did, or I went to a signing and I was a little kid and my dad brought me, and I'm just like, am I that old? Steve doesn't seem that old, and I remember him being older than me at the time. So it's just mind blowing in the sense of
I've always been
wow,
older
like
than
it's like it's almost like an archival project in a way. You know what I mean? It's like a retrospective of me as a young artist that I thought was buried in the past. I didn't even think this would resurface as anything, to be honest with you. And as you know, you're so self-critical as an artist. Sometimes you look at stuff that you did 25 years ago and you're just like, I don't know if I want this re-released because of what you've done, in your career. But like I look back at it and I look at the art and I look at the original art and I compare the comics and I'm reading it and I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Like I can't believe I did this in my early 20s, like with no Google,
yeah,
with nothing. Like where did I
yeah,
get all this, So
yeah.
it's really interesting.
Well, I, I have the same experience. Um, yeah, yeah. I have a lot of people who come up to me with their own kids, and and they started reading Zen when they were a kid, and now they introduce Zen to their kids. So it's a quote unquote, as we say in the ad biz, a multi-generational property, and I love it. I mean, Zen has been such a blessing to me. It literally got me out of the advertising business and, just squarely in the comic biz, which I've been for many decades now. So, yeah, it's a mind blowing
So
experience.
that's so funny that you say that, Steve. So not only did Zen save the world or the planet or the universe, but he also got you out of advertising.
Yeah, he
He
saved me
saved
too.
you from advertising.
Yeah, that's so true.
Amazing.
Yeah,
That's it.
See, it's so interesting too, because obviously we are in a different time as well, where I think 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, crowdfunding didn't exist the same way it exists today. And
mhm,
obviously, COVID, I felt, ushered in a new era of crowdfunding, and it opened up new possibilities. And so, obviously, this project is also kind of at the right time, I feel, in a lot of ways,
yeah,
where people are really big into crowdfunding. Obviously, first is interested in pushing it out, and there's a demand for properties like this. People are bringing back old things. Ben Dunn is bringing back Tomorrow Girl, and there's a bunch of other people who are bringing back their old content and releasing it. And so, what is that like too?
Mhm.
Because it's kind of, I don't want to say it's opportunistic, but the technology is there to make this happen,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
self-funding this and going to a publisher and pitching it would be not impossible, but it would be difficult. And the fact that you can do this relatively on your own, and that I think you're over 12,000, which is amazing. And people want this product, and they're really into this. And what is that like too, that even after, 25 years, and I don't know as much about Zen as other people. And I'm like, man, that book looks
yeah,
awesome. And that's what stopped me to look at the Kickstarter and be like, oh, this thing looks awesome. And it looks trippy. And what is this story about? And it caught my eye. So there's people like me who are coming into this for the first time.
yeah,
I love that. I mean, if you think about it, it becomes popular enough. This is a story that can just kind of be told over and over, or like new audiences can experience this as it was created yesterday in a way. So technology,
yeah,
crowdfunding, yeah, it's kind of we're in a new age where technology is
yeah,
definitely aiding us in that way, you know? So
yeah. I
I'm
think the
extremely
social
grateful.
media Yeah. I think the
Yeah, the
social
social media has
media
pushed
has
it.
created a paradigm shift, right? The world is not the same as it was even pre-COVID. The opportunities that exist to create your own property and to promote it and to fund it, it's unprecedented. This also happens to be the greatest time in human history to be a content creator. Why? Two words: social streaming media. Okay. There's an insatiable, unending appetite and necessity for content, whether it's Amazon Prime, Netflix, or the numerous Disney, you name it. And so there's just great opportunities due to basically technology today.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, I can tell you as an interviewer, I was an interviewer before COVID. And then during COVID, I started going live and it's haven't looked back. And I have an abundance of guests and I don't ever have a guest problem. And there's people who I never thought would be on my
Yeah.
show who have gotten on my show because I just simply shot an email and I asked. And it's the weirdest thing in the world where saying, "Hey, do you want to interview someone?" It's like, "Yeah, when do you want to do it?" And there's been all these people and there is people starving for content, and there's never been a better time for me as an interviewer, and I don't foresee it stopping for another 40 to 50 years minimum.
Easily. Yeah.
And
You
so
know,
I agree
Yeah.
completely, and I love it. I love it. I have no complaints about what COVID's been a good thing for me, and it's been a good thing for content
Yeah.
creators. I don't
yeah,
want it,
Yeah.
and
See,
I
there's
want to say
always a
this
silver
clear.
lining.
I'm not saying
always,
I'm for COVID here,
always.
but,
Yeah.
but it changed the way I function. It changed the way I work at my day job, and it's been a net positive for me. But if we had to
It's
choose my net positive or COVID not to happen, we would clearly pick COVID not to happen. But I digress.
Of course.
I mean, it saved a lot of people, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of people lost people, but I feel like that's the universe, right? There's a lot of dualities that are happening
Yeah.
simultaneously. Whether you want to admit it or not, like, there's growth and there's, also an implosion um, but yeah, I mean, that's great. Like, I feel like COVID made people become more creative in a way because they were forced to.
Oh
They
yeah.
couldn't be out. They were just basically like shut in, and then the only thing that they had was the internet. That was their only outside
Yeah.
world. So it
So true.
caused this massive expansion in that realm, that didn't
Yeah.
exist before.
I was speaking with somebody, a woman named Bella Rockefeller, and what she said to me, and it actually changed my opinion. She said during COVID, a lot of people spent a lot of time with themselves, and they
Hmm.
figured out who they are and they figured out what they want. And
Hmm.
that changed how we function as a society. Because when
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
figure out who you are exactly, and then you figure out
Mhm.
saying, what makes me happy and what do I want? What I think that dictated into comics is that I think it birthed a bunch of new creators. So I think a
Hmm.
bunch of people said, I
Yeah.
want to tell stories and I want to do this now.
Hmm.
Now, they're not necessarily doing it for money.
Hmm.
But they're saying, I want to tell 2 comic stories a year. And even just those steps, and if there wasn't an impetus to do that, or there wasn't time to breathe, or you weren't working from home and you were just in the grind every day, that would have never been brought to the forefront. And I think it's a good thing for comics. I think it's saved indie comics in a lot of ways. I really do.
It did. It created new indie comics, actually.
Yeah.
People had time to make their story again. People had time to create their dream projects that they would
Right.
have never had time to before. People had time to start painting. People had time to start telling stories, you know?
It's
So,
all true. It's all true.
yeah, I mean, I like to look at those things, and obviously, I'm not shutting my eyes to the horrible things that COVID did. It's just that I would rather harp on the positive than harp on the negative.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too as a creator, because as a creator, if we can hop on the negative, it doesn't really serve us anymore in that purpose of creating. I feel like the paradigm shift in that way is you focus on the positive, and that opens up like almost like all this energetic flow to create, because you are positive and you're focusing on your
Yep.
creation, and you're realizing that you are a creator. Everybody's a creator, not just me, not Steve Stern, like everyone. It's our innate ability
Right.
as a human being. So,
Different forms
yeah,
of creation. And of course, today, also, some people read their comics and graphic novels digitally, which is that's it. I'm old school, so of course I like to hold the hard copy. But listen, there's a whole new audience of people out there who are reading their books digitally, and that's fine. That's
we should
fine.
do a new digital Zen Intergalactic Ninja comic, Steve,
Well,
specifically.
don't if you say that, I'm going to hold you to it, sir.
You just got to
We'll do
get
it.
an
Yeah.
illustrator that I can work with, because I'm not doing the grunt work anymore.
Oh, trust me,
You
there are
know,
many
I will help
illustrators who want to
fashion.
work with you.
Awesome. Yeah,
We'll
I'm
do it. We'll
down.
do it. You heard it here first, folks. We're going to collaborate on some new Zen
Digital.
digital project.
Yeah.
So what is that like for
Okay.
you, that obviously now that you've sort of, I don't want to say made it, but you have a big name, both of you do, that really a lot of people will jump at the chance to work with either one of you or both of you. And what is that like? Because it's kind of a cool feeling when, you can say, cool, people want to work with me. And I can be very selective because it gives you a lot of power. Gives you a lot of power, and you can get arguably the best of the best. And so, what
Yeah,
is
and
that
the power goes straight to your brain. No one kidding.
like?
Uh, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, to be honest, it's like I still pinch myself. The people that want to work with me are like, are excited to do stuff. So I'm super excited about working and creating new projects that I have coming up. But you know, back then I could never imagine this. I could never have pictured
Yeah.
this at the time. I mean, I was just a kid making comic books
Yeah, you were.
in Long Island, you know, like, yeah. So,
And
That's
even
how
for
your
you,
life goes. Yeah.
and even for you,
Well,
Steve,
I
what
could.
was this like? Because obviously, I mean, Lamar is, obviously done a lot of stuff. You've done a lot of stuff. I think you've worked on over like 100 comics, graphic novels. Obviously, you've
Yeah.
taken Zen from, a very basic concept now to being a property that's been around for, I think, 36 years and doing
Yeah.
well on Kickstarter with this project. And obviously
Yeah.
bringing it to First. And I think you've been with First for, I think, 2011, I want to say. I think
Yep.
since.
Yep.
And if
Exactly.
I'm not mistaken, and so that's a long time to be with a publisher. And so, what is that also like for you? Because obviously, I hate to say this, but how many properties make it past 10 years, let alone 20, let alone 36?
Yeah. Well, I basically say this: Zen's been a blessing to me. Really has. He's an evergreen kind of a character who I know now he's going to outlive all of us. He is. It's just a fact of life. Um, I have many new Zen stories that I still want to tell. Zen has had different incarnations, the environmental. He was a soldier of fortune. Right now, he's essentially a bounty hunter. When The Mandalorian came out, some people said to me, "Oh, Steve, you must be jumping on the bounty hunter bandwagon." Truth of the matter is, Zen became a bounty hunter in the book called Zen Bounty Hunter, published in 2005. Okay, so it's just just running with the zeitgeist, uh, and it's just an amazing thing. There's a lot of new things happening. I just completed a Zen movie script with a very good friend of mine who's also an established director. And my publisher, who's also my manager, is also an executive producer on The Boys on Amazon Prime, which is a huge hit. And it was just announced that there's going to be a spin-off series. The fellow's name is Ken F. Levin. He's an amazing guy. He brought me into the First Comics fold in 2011. He founded First Comics, back in the day, and of course they were the seminal indie publisher with American Flag and Badger and Sable. I mean, iconic titles. So Ken is an amazing guy, and I'm working with him now, moving hopefully into the film area, possibly the TV area. So yeah, so there's just infinite possibilities after 36 years.
I just realized I need to write myself, because I am a comic book character, into the Zen storyline.
Done.
Am I crazy? You know what I mean? Like,
no, you're not crazy.
That album cover I talked about previously with MF Doom and Czarface, I am a comic book character. And ever since that started, weird things have happened in my real life, coinciding with creative stuff that I've been thinking about, of writing about my comic book character self. So if you look at the cover
Great.
of the Zen compilation, I'm actually in there. I put myself in there. I'm in the triangle. I'm in the pyramid.
Yes, you are. With that as well.
Yeah.
Very,
See, I have a picture of
Yeah.
it. I think this
What's it
is what
called?
we're
There you
talking
go.
about.
Yeah.
yeah.
If you look at the top part of there, the dude with the hat on, which is basically the hat I normally wear, which is like a Stetson open road. That's me kind of like in this pose. But again, that's part of like this weird time travel thing, or a window into Zen. But I would like to write a story where it's like me and Zen somehow. You know what I mean? Like, how meta is that? That I'm actually going into the comic. It's basically a aha video.
Well,
Take on me.
well,
And
we're
guess
hearing
where I
some-
am?
We're hearing some.
Guess where I
great-
am? I'm in Norway right now. Is that
He's
funny?
in Norway. Yeah. Well, we're hearing
So,
some
I can't
revelatory
make this
things
up.
today that.
So many things I could say.
Wow.
So many things I could say. But since we did show that cover, I think it's a good time to talk about some rewards and some other stuff that people can get. And this is my favorite part because it has pictures in it. And so obviously I think this is one of the covers. And this is it in hardcover. So there's the hardcover, there's the soft cover. Obviously, different people have different preferences. There's a little bit of a different price component to it. And then obviously that's also, I think, the cover as well in another shot. But then you have some weird stuff in there like this, which I think is a blacklight poster, and it's flocked. And I don't know if you need one of these, guys, to have fun with it, because this is a blacklight. The miniature blacklight, but what's the story behind that? Because that's kind of trippy that you have this. It's obviously flocked. It's a poster, and then it might have blacklight components to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my color
I don't
scheme
know-
has always been that fluorescent 80s skateboard color palette. The fluorescent colors has been like a big part of my palette. And I think when I was a kid, like the first memories of images that influenced me, in the 70s was blacklight posters. Like they caught my imagination as a child, and the texture and, the effect that they had when you would put a black light on and turn off the lights. And this cover is heavy black. So there's going to be a lot of flocking on it, but also the colors are popping. So it should be really interesting to see this in a dark room with just like a black light on it. So we shall see.
Yeah, that's
So
also a
let's
very
actually-
popular item.
So let's actually talk
Excuse
about
me.
that because on Kickstarter, this is how I feel, is that there's a million Kickstarters right now
Mhm.
out there, and you have to now earn my dollar. While Kickstarter allows a lot of creators to do things, you have to earn my dollar. And so having a flocked poster or having other weird or different items, maybe weird is not the
Mhm.
right word, but having a different item, having something that is a bit more trippy, a little bit out there, gets my attention. And so what is that like? Because I think that's part of the success on Kickstarter is having a good comic, but also having rewards that are different. Because clearly, that kind of gets people's attention. So what is that like to really make sure you hit those niches? And then there's another
Yeah.
reward we're going to talk about that's my wheelhouse in some regards as well in a second.
Steve's
But
done a really good job
Okay. Well,
of, creating these products. If you think about it, blacklight poster is such a nostalgic thing in fantasy art and comic art. The Jack Kirby original Marvel blacklight prints. I think in that vein was such a clever thing to do for Zen. Paying homage to the OG King. But go ahead, Steve. I
mhm.
mean, you assembled a card set too, and I'm already in the card
Yeah.
world as well too. So these are
Right.
art pieces from the comic that are now in card format, which
Right.
is just going to grow actually because the world
Right.
that I'm creating, that I'm a comic book character in, is going to expand into different merchandise realms of collectible cards, comics or posters and prints. So I think this is just like one of those things. Is like if you're a fan of either Zen or me and Steve, these are things that are kind of like a must-have because they're only going to be available kind of here, nowhere else, right? Like maybe in person when Steve does a
Right.
signing or something, but it's not going to be like something that's just going to be like
yeah,
sold at Newberry Comics.
let's
Yeah.
actually touch upon that too, because I think the blacklight stuff is 80s, early 90s. In a lot of ways, is sort of where I go
Right.
in the 90s. They're super hot. Cards are right now probably one of the hottest collectibles on the planet, and I don't think
Mhm.
it's going to stop
Yeah.
anytime soon. And so
No.
obviously people are card collectors, and people, and I'm going to say this the nicest way I can, might not necessarily care about the comic, but they might care about the cards because they're
Right.
really into
Right.
that, and card collectors like that. And so now that's a whole nother avenue as well. And so that opens up the door for something. And so I think that it's really interesting because you might be hitting 3 or 4 niches intentionally or unintentionally why people might come and back this project. I want obviously the hardcover book and a card set.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm interested in more so than a blacklight poster. But somebody else might say, look, I don't really like cards, but I want the blacklight poster.
Oh, yeah.
And
Right.
it's all depending on what you want. The poster for me is not my jam. I don't know where to hang it, but the cards I'm really into. And so
Oh,
that's
yeah.
something that I think is so interesting because you have somebody like me, and there's probably a bunch of people like me, and there's a bunch of people who say, I like that poster. And that's what's really
Mhm.
cool about this campaign is you have those
Yeah.
two divergent paths.
Right. And let us not forget these 11 by 17 metallic art prints. It's a new technology. They're awesome. First Comics did a series of comic books with a metal cover. Okay. And they sell constantly at the conventions, which is where we sell them, and they're like $100 a piece. This is a regular size comic book with a metal cover. Now we're talking at a much lower price, a an 11 by 17 metallic art print that's suitable for framing and it will go up on a lot of people's walls. And I will tell you that both of course, the soft cover and hardcover graphic novel, virtually everyone orders. But then when it comes to things other people are wanting, it's the blacklight poster, it's the cards, and it's the metallic wall poster. So it's a nice mix of items, whether you're more art directed or story directed. The 34 collectible cards, which are also in a really cool box, really cool packaging, which also is a brand new piece of Lemoore art. The cover of the graphic novel and the packaging of the collectible card packaging. Those are the two new pieces of art that Lemoore did.
Also, I don't know if you guys are, I mean, obviously, Czarface, there's a whole collectible card series that I did with Czarface that came in a metal lunchbox that came inside the album. You know, like things like this is kind of like connecting the dots, you know, like the world of collectible cards, the world of collectible prints, the world of collectible comics. Um, it's a culmination of all the things that I've done, all the things that Steve wants to do, you know, and has done. So I don't know, it's going to be really interesting to see the package all in its physical form in front of you. It's going to be
Yeah.
like it's going to be like me looking at my first comic again for the first time when I looking at an actual comic and seeing like, oh my God, I did this art, you know? So it's almost like another time travel to that point in time. So
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on here. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, for sure.
It's so interesting because I view this, and obviously I'm 30, so I think I'm younger than both of you. And obviously I'm coming into Zen for the first time. But I think also, and I said this before, I think a lot of people are looking for good products. And I think, a lot of people are going old school lately. And they're going back to the 90s because the 90s are really hot right now. And I think people, and look, I go back to the 80s with the Teen Titans, as I mentioned earlier as well. And we're speaking about that because I love that era, and I think it's some of the best storytelling ever. And I think there's a lack of that. And I think people are saying, look, what is a good story? What is affordable? And I think the soft cover, I think is what, 25? I think around that price range, I think. It might even be.
Yeah.
And then the hardcover, which, I call a bookshelf book, meaning it looks lovely in your bookshelf.
Or coffee table.
Coffee table works too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have a bookshelf. I don't have a coffee table, so I use what I like to use because I like to clean out my books on the row.
Yeah.
I wake up and I look at it. It makes me
Yeah.
feel comfortable. You can say I know that book, that book, and that book. It's awesome. But my point is it's a coffee table book too. But I think a lot of people also like that too because they like having a nice, clean looking product. And I think that's the other thing too here is that it's cool to look at floppies and single issues, but it's also nice to say, hey, this is a nicely formatted book. I think that a stretch goal has been unlocked where I think, you're either close to it or it's going to happen with gloss covered on all physical. So
we'll get there for sure.
And it's also 25 years in the making. Let's talk about that. Like the idea that it took 25 years to get this book the way it actually is. It's kind of mind blowing.
It is mind blowing, and I'm calling this book the comic art book event or the comic art book of the year because I really cannot think of another comic or graphic novel coming out in the year 2023 that is going to be able to be anywhere near visually what this book represents. I think it's going to become a cherished collectible. I do.
Also, I mean, like not tooting my own horn, but I'm going to toot my own horn. Like how many comic book artists kind of expanded into all the different realms, whether it was toys. The toy fans are going to want this, whether it's baseball cards, the baseball card collectors are going to want this, whether it's, the Czarface guys are going to want this, or like, just the mural fans or who, just fans in general, they're going to be like, oh, this is kind of like the book to get this year because it is an art book.
Yeah.
I know it's a comic book, but
It is.
for me, I've incorporated the comic book style into fine art, and I'm doing paintings literally in the same aesthetic. So I think it is a great art book not just a comic book, but it is an art book.
Yeah. Well,
I'm excited.
recently, you know, I live in LA, and I went to the Basquiat exhibition and the Keith Haring exhibition. And when I see what's on the walls there, I have to believe that the day is going to come sooner rather than later when there will be a L'Amour Supreme major exhibition here. I seriously mean that.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. I mean, I do come from the same place. You know,
Yes,
I
you
am
do.
a New York native. I did grow up with those guys with their graffiti
Yeah,
on the walls. I remember that as a kid. And I was like
sure.
a strong memory in my mind knowing that whatever these guys are doing, I want in. And I might have been 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah,
But I always was influenced by them. And I think New York City is a vibration in the sense of like, if you come from here and you strive to be an artist here, you know, there's few that actually succeed. But if you do, it's kind of like this amazing experience where you see the other artists that came before you and you kind of like pay respects to them and acknowledgement of like appreciation and love of, you know, almost like influencing you to be who you are as an artist. So
right.
yeah, hopefully what, you
And
know, from your mouth to God's ears, inshallah, whatever they say, you know, I'd love to have an exhibition at the
yeah,
LACMA or something, you know, a retrospective, who knows, whatever. I'd just be happy to be able to
right.
show. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, it's everything's a continuum, and you're also very, very prolific. If the folks go to L'Amour's Instagram, which is at L'Amour Supreme, you will see thousands. I think at this point, it's like thousands of pieces of remarkable art that he's done. So, you know, he's got a
But
body
also
of work that is in
legendary
Go ahead.
collaborations. I think that's the way I'd like to put it. Like, it's not really, yes, it is my work, but that's not what makes it great. I think it's the legendary collaborations that makes my work, like being able to work with different creatives and artists and kind of like, you know, looking back and marveling on like, wow, this is what he did. After Zen, he went into architectural design and he didn't do art for
Yeah.
years. And then after his daughter was born, there was this explosion or resurgence or renaissance. And I wanted to do art again the same way that I had enthusiasm when I was in my early 20s. And then now it's kind of like a whole timeline of stuff. And it's so
Yeah, and you know,
interesting to even think
on
about.
on Lamour's timeline is work for Miley Cyrus, the Chainsmokers, SpongeBob, Nickelodeon, Nike, just a few household names. So you know what this man has done is remarkable, and his work has been exhibited in Stockholm, Berlin, Tokyo, in major galleries in New York City. So you know, Zen is also riding on this man, and so it's just a great collaboration.
So
And
that's the
that's what
story.
makes it
That's
so.
that's the comic story about how Zen is riding. Zen's riding my coattails.
I love it. I love it. We're going to do it now.
Or
You
like
you heard it here first. We're going to do it now.
it's an outer space adventure, intergalactic adventure where me and Zen team
Maybe
up.
inner space too. Inner space,
Yeah,
outer space.
yeah, inner space, outer space, and Zen is definitely kind of like this thing that started it all in a way. And
Yeah,
then, you know, the
yeah,
culmination of all
And,
that. Yeah.
and what's cool about this is that the place for indies ran comics right now is Kickstarter and crowdfunding, and
Mhm.
obviously this is coming full circle into that
hmm
too, which is sort of cool as well. Where you know you're pushing out the book that started it all for you in many ways on a crowdfunding platform
Mhm.
where indies are the hottest in the comic realm, And that's kind of a full circle thing too, in a lot of ways. And I kind of like it because I think this could have just been pushed out traditional. If it really
Totally.
wanted to, it would have been maybe a little bit more pitching, a little bit more corporate. But the fact that it was indie and pushed out indie for a lot of reasons is kind of, full circle. And I think it really speaks to the start of your career, what Zen is about, and really
Yeah.
what it was supposed to be. I mean, that's just my interpretation. I could be wrong.
No,
But if I
totally.
am,
No,
tell me
you're
what I'm
100%
getting.
right. Yeah. I mean, the whole
You-
spirit
you're,
of me and Steve creating was indie. Like, it was just all independent. Like, and also if you think about what was happening at the time was like big influences Wu-Tang. Think about Wu-Tang, like they were indie. They
Yeah.
got no radio play at the time, but yet they were the biggest hip hop
right.
group in the early 90s, you know? So it's really interesting
Yeah.
to think about. But the indie scene is like, to me, is kind of like, it's like the petri dish, where you have all these amazing creators able to tell their most unique story, in their most unique selves. Um, I think it's better, to be honest. Nothing
Yeah.
against Marvel, nothing against big corporate comics, but dude, think about the freedom and the creativity. If you ask me, the creativity is in the indie comics today. Like Marvel's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, they're telling the same rehashing
You're
stories,
absolutely
and there's some good stories here and there, but I mean, the
right.
indie comic scene is
Let me ask you. Let me ask you a question, and this is the part where we get controversial. What was the last good Marvel story? What was the last good DC story out there? And it's a controversial question to some degree, but I think it kind of states it all once we get to the real answers of all
I
this.
think Marvel's been doing a decent job of putting out, but I think they need to do more of it. You know what I mean? For me, Silver Surfer Black was
Mhm.
great. Like, what's the name? I can't even think of the name of that artist, but when I saw his art, it just spoke to me. Um,
Yeah.
his art
Yeah.
was incredible. It's so psychedelic and mind-bending and trippy. It almost looked like an indie comic. And I was
Yeah.
surprised that even Marvel allowed that to happen or do it. But
No,
I
I think
feel
it was
like
intentional.
this is the thing that Marvel needs to do, is to allow fans to create their own comics based off of their characters, fan fiction, whatever you want to call it. But that's the growth of that company. If they don't do that, I don't know. They're just going to keep making movies.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'll tell you something interesting talking about indie. Back in the 90s, Marvel, most people don't know this. Marvel offered to buy Zen. They offered us $25,000 and they would control the property. The decision obviously was made not to do that. And it was just a very personal decision on my part. I admire Marvel. I I knew Stan Lee quite well. I used to go visit him at his office in Beverly Hills, and then we'd go have lunch at Nate and Al's, this deli that's famous. That was right around the corner from his office. So and Stan was great. He knew that the key to success was letting the artists do what they wanted to do within the general framework of a story. So I just basically wanted to retain control of Zen, and obviously did. And being with First Comics, which is a creator owned company, it's perfect. So it's the perfect solution for me.
You look like you
yeah.
have something to say.
Sorry, me? No, sorry. I'm looking at my girlfriend's painting. She's actually painting across the room, and she's doing something that's quite amazing, actually. So, yeah.
I just saw
Really?
like the light in your eyes go off, and I'm like, "Oh snap! Does he have something to say?" Like I just saw it from like a mile out. I'm like, "Oh, I see that look!" Like there
Yeah.
was like a
No,
light in.
you see that look of me being like, that's really good. That's amazing. Yeah. So I'm here
Wow.
talking to you guys, but I'm also watching amazing art being made in front of me. So don't mind me.
Right. In
Yeah.
Norway, of all places.
In Norway, of all places. Yes.
So
Yeah.
Steve just mentioned something very interesting that I think is also interesting to talk about. Obviously, first is creator owned, and I think creator owned is very important. Where I control this show, I control my guests, I control what I ask,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of freedom to do what I want. And while I do listen to my audience, they don't make the final choices. I do. And there's been situations where people are like, why are you interviewing that person? And then 6 weeks later, like, oh, I get it. And obviously I have my audience in mind when I do things, but I think creator control is a big, big thing. And I think, obviously when you have the rights to do it, it's very important. And sometimes you don't. But I think more comics, and there is, sacrifice that is detailed with creator controlled properties without a doubt. But what is that like that first believes in you with Zen, and that they also believe in this Kickstarter, and that they're totally fine, obviously having it on their name, because that's a big, big trust. And that's a lot of faith for I think both of you. And obviously, I think you both have a track record,
Yeah.
but even still, when a company says, hey, we want to run it under our banner, it's a lot of trust and a lot of faith in this property, it funding, it being delivered, and it being pushed out there as saying, hey, we at first are fully behind this.
I think
Yeah.
Steve is a golden track record of publishing all these years. I mean, the stuff that he's put out has been consistently, done well. So I think that's why Kickstarter trusts us or Steve in general, because if I was publishing it, I don't know if I would trust myself. But Steve Stern is a publisher veteran in the comic book world. And I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer that he's offering something from the archives in a way. And that's relevant today.
Trust is a huge issue on Kickstarter. I've been burned, and there's a
Yeah.
creator, and he lost my complete trust. So
Yeah.
any project he does, I won't touch it because you've lost my trust in
Totally.
it. And the second you lose trust is the second I leave. And his book looks awesome. Awesome. It's right up my alley, but I, in good faith, cannot trust him anymore that he will deliver his next book because he messed up the book before that. And that's why I think it's so interesting that they have complete trust in you. I think it's a big deal, and I think it has to be acknowledged.
Also, the book is all in the can already.
Oh, yeah.
This is like something that doesn't have to be created. This is literally something that's just, the only thing that's new on it is literally the cover. So that's already done. Everything is literally ready to go. So it's not even a question of, meeting standard. It's just a matter of Steve actually manufacturing all these products and mailing them out. So I think that's a big, less worry as opposed to somebody having to create a book based on a Kickstarter.
Right.
You know what I mean? Most people do that type of Kickstarter, and it's just like, you have faith in somebody making a book or a project, and they might make it, they might not make it. This is done.
Right.
That's all I could say. So it's like, the idea of trust is kind of like, it's up.
So true.
I mean, I trust Steve. I've trusted him for 25 years.
Thank you. I trust you. Yes, you have. Well, trust is a key word. Like, I completely trust Ken Levin. He runs the First Comics show. He trusts, me. We will both trust Lamore, the work was done, but then we were waiting for the two new pieces, the cover and the box of the cards. And what this man delivered goes well beyond our wildest expectations. And so, but you're right, persistence, trust, these are the kind of things that make any kind of a business either work or not work.
Yeah, no. And also, obviously you've been around forever. Lamar's been around for a long time too. And then I don't know First at all. in any regard on a professional. I think I've had maybe 1 or 2 books in dealing with them, but nothing significant. And so obviously when I look at people and I vet Kickstarters, certain things definitely help to make me feel more comfortable or less comfortable on a Kickstarter. And that's a big thing. And there are certain things that give me trust. Nothing against you, Lamore, but Steve Stern's name on that Kickstarter makes me feel a hell of a lot more comfortable, because I'm like, oh, snap, he's in 100 graphic novels. I don't think this project is going to fail. The same way I don't think I'm going to be shellacked or somebody's going to take my money and run. And I think that's another thing too that's very important, that certain names help, give that credibility.
Totally. Yeah.
Immediately, just instant connection if you know comics off the bat. And you're like, bam, I guess, this person knows what they're doing. And hopefully. So, and then I do a little research and like, okay, this person has 100 comics under their realm. Chances are they're not running away with the money, because that happens.
Well, thank you. That's very flattering. Thank you for those. Thank you for those very kind words, Andrew. I appreciate it.
I just don't want my money stolen, guys. That's what this is about. That's all this is about, is that I just want good comics, and I also want people to, deliver what they're going to say to deliver on Kickstarter. And I don't think that's too much to ask. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But obviously, I'm very excited for this project. I'm very excited for the cards that I'm going to get. I don't even know exactly what's in the packs. I don't even know how that whole pack thing works. Is it the whole set? Is it 5 cards? Is it random? I don't really know. I'm going to be surprised just like everybody else. Don't ruin the surprise for me.
No, we won't. We won't.
I'm still going to be surprised myself. I'm not 100% sure what's in the card set, but I know it's my art. So that's what I trust in. And I also trust Steve to actually do a really good job in putting in this nice package and like putting it in a fancy bow. And, this is something that, again, it's already done. So it's not something that actually has to be done, which is a great aspect of it. But Steve Stern, again, Steve is a stand-up human being. I can't even begin to describe over 25 years I've known this man. And if you knew his personal history too, you would definitely be a fan. Not only trust, but just a fan.
Geez.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Lamore. You're awesome. You're awesome. And so are you, Andrew. Thank you.
I'm just ordinary. I'm just an ordinary individual who just wants to read comics, and I'm perfectly content. And I am beyond lucky and beyond privileged in my current environment, because the only thing I've ever learned how to do was keep asking and keep asking. And you eventually get places when you keep asking. You just keep going forward. And then that's what I've learned.
That's the way. Yeah, and you've had a lot of success so far with your podcast, and I'm honored that you asked us to be on it.
Well, I'm honored that you showed up. And then crazy, I'm sitting in Starbucks yesterday, and I'm like, I got this crazy idea to shoot him a message. And I'm like, it's a long shot. I don't know if I said, hey, I know this might be a long shot. And I just said, why the hell not? And we'll go for it. And I was hoping to surprise you, Steve. That was the point. And then he shot me a message, said, I'm going to shoot him the link too. And I'm like, I already beat you to it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, again, this is the way life works. Yeah, of course.
Sure. Andrew, I wouldn't be on here if it wasn't for you asking, to be honest. So thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm glad, because you, out of all of us, are making the biggest sacrifice by staying up late.
Oh, I'm actually painting with my girlfriend in Norway.
It looks like you're drinking a nice Chardonnay over there.
It's a Riesling, but
it's a Riesling.
It's so
very
good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice choice.
Yeah.
Nice choice. Great. Well, have we answered all your questions? Is there anything else you need to find out from us? Or
all I want to know is expected date, and then I'm going to give both of you a chance to self-promote, and anything relating to baseball, feel free to talk about. So when is this project actually? What is it up in, like 10 days, 10, 11 days?
Yeah, we got 10 days to go.
10 days.
we'll
And
hit
there you
some
go.
stretch goals, I believe, and then we'll go into once we know how much product we have to create, we'll go into production on it, and it will be delivered probably a lot faster than a lot of other projects where like the book isn't even started. This book is done and all of the art is done, so there we go.
There you go. And then obviously I want to give both of you a chance to self-promote yourselves. Where can people find you, bother you, follow you on social media, check out the Kickstarter? I know the link's in the description up above, down below to the side.
Right.
Obviously people
Right.
can check it out there, but even still, where can people, get in, check out what you're all doing?
Yeah. Well, I know that Lamore is at Lamore on Instagram is his primary social media, and he's at Lamore Supreme, right? And and I'm
Yep.
at the weird Stern 8506. I don't know, I think I jumped on Instagram. Somebody several years ago helped me just get an account, and they ended up with Stern 8506. Maybe there were 8,505 Sterns prior to me. That's the only thing I can figure out.
And then obviously, and I'm going to keep saying it, you have to support indie. And what that means is that when Kickstarters are live, you need to back those projects. And whether you're pledging $1 or $40 or $50 or $300, you need to back those projects, especially if you like those projects, because this is how they get made, or they get made faster. Furthermore, if it's not your cup of tea, a share, a like, a repost, a retweet goes a long way, and following people on social media. Or if that person, that artist, that writer, that creator, that publisher has a different book that you do like that you haven't picked up yet, you can go buy that book or support that book, which indirectly helps them to continue to make comics or anything for that matter. It goes a long way. And then as far as I'm concerned about me, I am Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. You could bother me on social media. You could hit me up. You could just say hi to me on social media. I do appreciate when people subscribe to YouTube. I think I have 518 subscribers, and YouTube just lowered their standard to monetization. So I appreciate when people subscribe or at least watch an interview or two of mine. And I can promise you this about my show: I cannot make you smarter, but I sure as hell will entertain you in some fashion, because there's an interview for you on my YouTube channel. So that's everything that I have. And I don't know who wants the last word.
Steve?
Fantastic. Well, I just want to thank you, Andrew. Continued success to you. Looking forward to this beautiful comic art book coming out, and working in the future once again with Lamore, because you heard him here first saying he wants to work on a new comic book, Zen Comic Project. And so this made my day. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you to everyone that supported this. Thank you to you, Andrew. Thank you to Steve. This is just furthering our project, our creative endeavors. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
And I don't think I
Thank you.
could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is a